Hi, my name is Adara Enthaler, and this is my poem, Auntie. I wrote Auntie about shock, my experience of becoming an auntie, but more than that, about my experience with pregnancy. I'm 31 now. I wrote this poem when I was 29, and I had an abortion when I was 18. And then my sister had a baby 10 years later, and it brought a lot of feelings flooding back about pregnancy, and my sister had a miscarriage. That's in the poem as well. It's about all of my personal experiences dealing with fertility and loss in a way, and the choice whether or not to have kids, as well as overall those are universal themes for women as well. I think it does touch on a decision and an experience that a lot of women go through, especially these days. 16 weeks ago, I became an auntie. After 12 hours of labour, my sister's baby burst forth and broke from tradition by arriving 4 weeks early with a penis. And I know everyone says this, but he's the cutest baby that ever lived. I took a really long time to write this poem because I didn't know how to start it. And for a really long time, I didn't have anything to share other than sort of grief. No revelations, nothing good, nothing helpful to anyone. And then when my sister started trying to get pregnant and then getting pregnant and then having a miscarriage and then having my nephew, it brought back a lot of those feelings from 10 years ago when I had an abortion that I didn't expect to. Everything felt new and different, and I realized there was a way in to talk about this experience now. I had something to say, I had something good, I had something helpful, and as I often do when I want to talk about something intense, I made a joke. I started in a place of family and comedy, and it was the right way in. It helps to talk about intense things if you can let the audience know that you're okay. It's really intense when someone does a poem that makes you think they're really not okay now, to the point that you need to do a wellness check on them. I've had that experience as a slam host, which is fair enough. People often want to do a poem about something they're experiencing now or something that they've only just come through. But it can also be enormously triggering, and this is a very sensitive subject. I did not want to take it lightly and trigger anyone. But I also didn't feel like I could get up on stage and say, hi, this poem has a trigger warning for abortion. Partly because I wanted, didn't want to bury the lead like that, but also just because I didn't want anyone to have any preconceived notions about what the poem was going to be about. I wanted to sort of ease into it in that way, because it can be really triggering, and I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards who'd gone through either abortions or miscarriages, and they saw that there's a big connection between those two experiences, and I got a lot of hugs from the audience at Bankstown Poetry Slam. It was really nice. Yeah. My family is blissfully showering him in love that he stores in the rolls and rolls that make up his arms and legs. His marshmallow body is passed from arm to arm, and if I could fit his entire body in my mouth, I would just eat him up. 16 weeks ago is 6 months after my sister told us something was growing in her belly, and 6 months before that she said the same. When nothing came from something, and we quietly mourned to someone who took a little longer to arrive. I experience the world through touch. I love sensations. I love summer because of the heat on my skin and the water of the ocean on my body. I love hugging my friends and family. We are a very touchy family and chosen family. And a baby is just all physicality. You're so drawn to touch a baby, which is a weird sentence, but you want to squeeze them and hold them and kiss them and put them in your mouth, just all in your mouth. I want to eat the baby. I don't know what that is about nature, that you want to eat cute things, but you do. 90% of my thoughts about my nephew were how he and I were connecting, because obviously he's an infant and we can't talk, but we can cuddle and I can hold his little hand. And I got to see him every week after he was born when staying with my sister after work. And he would wake her up at 6:30 in the morning, and she would come into the spare room and kind of just drop him gently on me and wake me up that way. So I got to see him, and he's all gurgles and smiles and cries. And it's very grounding, I think. Maybe that's what finally helped me figure out how to write this poem, was because it didn't feel so intangible anymore. There was a real life infant connected to me genetically that could sort of take the place of all of these memories that I was struggling with. I am so grateful that my nephew could be this living balm to the poem, this absolute source of joy for the listener and for myself and for my family, even though it is a very intense experience to have someone in your family go through a miscarriage. And sometimes you share these things with family members who then share their own experiences that you perhaps weren't aware of. Miscarriages and abortion are one of those things that people just still don't really share willingly unless they're drunk or, unless it's necessary to help someone else. My sister's miscarriage isn't something that she went through by herself. Unfortunately, my abortion was something I went through by myself. I didn't feel comfortable talking about it to almost anyone except friends while I was drunk for the next several years. If you can watch any video of me performing, and I will have my phone in this hand and my hand on my belly here, and it's unconscious. It's partly to ground me, partly so that my hand's not like just wandering off over here, like clenching and unclenching, but also because I find it a good sort of starting point for my hand to reach out for emotion or up for emotion. I find in the more serious moments of a poem, I am still. And in the funny ones, I can move more, even if it's just my head. The 2000s fashion rule of don't have your legs and your boobs out at the same time can also be applied to poems. You shouldn't be performing with your body the entire time. You shouldn't necessarily be speaking the entire time. You need moments, you need breaks. You can't do everything everywhere all at once. All those weeks ago, my sister counts the weeks forward to the safety line, and I offer cautious encouragement. But as she tells of morning sickness and leg pain, all I can selfishly think about is how 10 years ago I reached 11 weeks almost without noticing. My sister shows us the ultrasound of her abdomen, and I feel sick to my stomach. I count each week up to her success until she reaches where I stopped and passes it. I lay hands on her swollen belly and think of how I emptied my own, and against my better judgment, I hate myself. This poem probably had the slowest beginning out of some that I've done. I really did ease myself and the listeners into it. So it's not until the fourth, fifth stanza that I really start getting to the point of the poem, which is abortion and my experience with that. And that's where I came back to experiencing things physically. My sister described what she was experiencing in her body, and my body responded by almost mirroring some of her experiences. It tried to recall the memory of what I could have gone through physically, and that manifested as nausea, whether because my body was trying to imagine her morning sickness. When someone says they're itchy and you start scratching, or because I just genuinely felt so much anxiety that my guts were twisted up. But that was the moment at the family dinner table on a Sunday lunch that made me realize I was starting to think about that experience again, and I needed to do something about it. The first thought was not write a poem. The first thought was get over it and take care of your sister. This isn't about you. And that's why there is that line about selfishness and hating myself, because I felt so unbelievably self-absorbed to be thinking about something that happened a decade ago while my sister was going through active grief right in front of us. But I didn't let that experience overshadow what she was going through. I didn't bring it up with her. I worked on it privately, and working on it privately eventually turned into a poem about it. I read something in an article once that said something along the lines of You can't keep strumming the raw nerve of your trauma until your fingers are bleeding, which basically means you can't keep bringing up your past traumas over and over again for the sake of performance. It's not healthy. There is nothing wrong with sharing your traumas on a stage, but Bill Moran, who is a Texan poet who used to travel to Australia, he has something about you can lead your audience into a dark room, but you need to lead them to the light switch. You can't take people to a dark place and leave them there. It's so irresponsible and harmful. You can talk about your traumas, you can talk about the worst thing that's ever happened to you into a microphone. You have the right to do that with trigger warnings. But if you're just rehashing the worst thing that ever happened to you and then finishing your poem and leaving the stage and everyone just has to sit in it, I don't think you're taking care of yourself or anyone else when you do that. So I held off on writing this poem for 10 years because I didn't have anything helpful to say. And if I was going to do this poem, I wanted it to heal. I didn't want to hurt anyone or myself. And in a few years, I will probably stop doing this poem because it will start to feel like that, like I'm rehashing a difficult experience. Even with all the joy that is in this poem, it will start to feel like I'm strumming that nerve and I will leave it behind. It's unfortunate, I think, that we still don't talk about the difficulties of pregnancy and childbirth as much as we should. We all know. We watch a video sometime in high school of a woman screaming and blood everywhere. We know that it's traumatic, but we don't really understand it until we hear first-person accounts of what people go through. And even though we're not living in the ancient past where the mortality rate for childbirth was super, super high, it is still really high. The worst thing that can happen in childbirth is that you both die. And that can still happen, and that's a horrifying thing. And that's one of my many reasons for not wanting to have kids. I don't want to risk my life. And we don't talk about how high the miscarriage rate is. You could have a group of 5 mothers in a room talking. They might have 6 children between them and like 12 miscarriages. And a couple of abortions probably as well. Just because you have kids doesn't mean you will always keep every pregnancy. There are a million scenarios where someone can be pregnant and either want or not want to be pregnant, and there are choices to make in that scenario. And it's so taboo to talk about that. I've seen so many sitcoms where someone gets pregnant against their will. They don't want kids. It was an accident. And then they all go, well, guess you're having a baby. Because how many TV shows are there where someone has an abortion? The only path forward is seen as, I guess you have to have a kid now. And you don't. Married couples have had abortions because they can't afford a kid, or the woman's health is compromised, or, well, that was a bit heteronormative. The pregnant person's health would be compromised. There are so many reasons. Maybe you already have a kid and they have really high care needs and you just would not be able to physically handle it if you had another kid. People have a lot of intense opinions about abortions. I'm not unaware that this is a political topic, but it's personal first. This is a choice people make for their well-being. There is the stereotype of a pregnant girl who gets an abortion, which I filled. I was so close to reaching 20 and not being a teenage pregnant girl. I failed. That's fine. But there are so many people who get pregnant for all kinds of reasons at any ages, where we can get pregnant all the way up to, 45 or something like that. I would have an abortion if I was 45. I think my spine would break in half. I would have to for my health. And that's something I'm always aware of as well. I had this experience that affected me greatly. It might happen again. And I would make the same decision, even with all my feelings about it. I don't regret anything, because I have to take care of myself. I think, unfortunately, because of the heteronormative society we live in, the path that we are shown forward across so many cultures is marriage, children, gardening, death. There isn't really another acceptable path forward, unfortunately. A lot of cultures are inherently misogynistic to different degrees. So it is expected that a woman will fulfill this role. And it means a lot more to a woman than it does a man. A man can become a father and it doesn't have to change anything about the way he lives his life if he's a shit father. But it affects a woman in every single way. Unfortunately, it is seen as the failure of a woman if she doesn't live up to these. So if she doesn't find a husband she's a failure. If she doesn't have kids, she's a failure. If she gets pregnant and loses a baby, that's her fault. And that's a big part of why we don't talk about miscarriages themselves, not even touching on abortions, because of course society is going to tell you that's your fault. You paid $440 for it. You went to the appointment. But miscarriages happen for all kinds of reasons, and usually to people who are actively trying to get pregnant and have children, and it's so sad. But unfortunately, society keeps telling them, maybe you did something wrong, maybe you didn't eat right, maybe you're just not fertile enough, but keep trying. Keep rehashing this trauma over and over again for as long as it takes until you have a child. I think that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to write about this, was because I didn't want to speak for everyone who's ever had an abortion and be like, I was devastated and felt weird, so you should be devastated and feel weird. There are lots of people who go through it and go, well, that was like getting an ingrown toenail pulled out. It was uncomfortable, but now it's over and I can live my life and feel better and walk freely. So I really hope that no one listens to my poem and feels like they should feel worse about the experience. Because you can feel however the hell you want to feel about that kind of thing. Against my better judgment, I hate myself. Not for the choice that I made, not for regret, not for severing the tie between myself and a man who does not deserve an entry into any of my poems, but for the self-pity that I hold. It has taken me 10 years to write about my abortion, because it was mine. That nearly got me. Fuck, that's an emotional poem. That stanza is where I got serious about the poem. That was where the audience had to take a breath with me and accept that this is what this poem is about, and we're going to talk about this experience now. Well, I'm going to talk and they're going to listen. But it was something that we were sharing together, especially given that that was the very first time I ever performed it. I think it's the most honest line, maybe, in that whole poem. There's nothing flowery in that language. That wasn't the time for being tricky with my wordplay. I just needed to come out and say it. And there might have been people in the audience who might have heard the line, I hate myself, and assumed that I regretted my abortion. And I wanted to be very clear that I didn't. I had a very particular kind of grief for the opportunity to be a mother that I didn't take, and I chose not to take. And when you're such a tactile person, I can imagine it. I don't want it, but I can imagine it. It's hard not to think about. It has taken me 10 years to write about my abortion because it was mine. Because until now, I had nothing but grief. Not for a baby lost, but for the potential I picture every month that almost was, that might have been. At 18 and 29 and every year in between, I have pictured a baby girl, because of course I have. The thing I wanted to talk about in this poem was that I am entitled to grief. I am as entitled to grief as anyone who had a miscarriage and never had an abortion. I do feel a loss of potential. I come from a big family. I love the idea of being a mother. I don't like the reality of being a mother. I don't want that for my life. It's too hard. I have so much admiration for people who do, but it's not for me. But there is still grief. I can see my family in 5 years. There's going to be at least 3 more grandchildren, and Christmas is going to be loud, and I'm the only single sibling, so I'm going to do a lot of babysitting, and I can't wait. But of course I pictured a daughter. I think a lot of women probably do. It's difficult being a woman in that society that tells you that you have to have kids, because if you say that you don't want to have kids, some people will try to pick apart that decision and be like, oh, well, you must hate kids. You must not have enough money for it. You must just be chronically single. All of those things are true about me, except for the first one. I actually love kids. I do, and I love family. I shouldn't have to deny parts of myself to justify my decision. And some people will expect that, and I wanted to let people know that you don't have to have a hard and fast line in the sand between you and children or you and pregnancy. You can have your own experience and feel any kind of way about it. And this is the way I feel about it. And when my nephew was on his way, we all assumed girl, assumed niece. And as sweet as that baby boy is, part of me still hopes that one day Victor might have a very profound realization and start going by Vicky, and I will have a niece after all. But it really doesn't matter, because I will see that baby that might have been in every child created by my bloodline. My brother is the only boy out of 4 of us, 2 of them, 1 of her. Out of my nan's 7 grandchildren, my brother was the only boy. And my nan also, I think, was the 11th girl out of 13. There were 2 boys. So we liked to brag a lot, especially with my nan being single. Her husband was not worth mentioning. So she raised her children essentially alone. And we love her for that. And she always kind of hated men a little bit. She'd like see an article about a war in a magazine, and she was already too checked out to know what the war was, but she'd sort of just read it and be like, oh, the world's terrible. And I'd be like, yeah, it is, Nan. And she'd be like, yeah, we should kill all the men. Which wouldn't necessarily solve anything, but she was a hater. She was a man hater through and through. So all us girls were like, yeah, the girls. Like, we're just dominating the lineage and the DNA. So then when my older sister got pregnant, she was the first one of all those grandkids who was about to have a baby. And then she had a boy. That was wild. And my mum was so dead set that Bronte's first kid would be either on the due date or a few weeks late, because that's what all of us had been. We'd either been on very, very close to the due date or a week or 2 after. And then Victor was like, no, I'm out a month early. I'm done. Let's go. And we were like, what the fuck, man? You were supposed to be a girl. What do you mean? And I think I appreciate my nephew for totally breaking out of these traditions and being something unexpected. I think that's a good start to a new generation to do what he wants. I also had to make a joke in the middle of my grief. And it really is. It felt it when I performed it for the first time. This was such a big breath for me and the audience after such a heavy couple of stanzas to be like, here's a little joke. Here's a breather. It's okay. I'm okay. You're okay. I used to hear it in high school when people were reading scripts. They'd get 2 people up to the front of the class and they'd read the script to each other and they would say it as if they'd never heard human beings speak before. It wasn't natural. So you don't have to put on I am a poet and I have to do my poems like this. It's the first thing we all do when we get into poetry slams. We do it, we're all guilty of it. But you can play with it, you can linger. It's an important first step in finding your poet voice. You are allowed to draw out your syllables and not pitch your voice back up. This is the one note I've been saying for this whole line, and it's not boring. And it's very easy for, I think, Australian girls in particular to do that thing where we go up at the end of all of our sentences. Or if we're doing a long speech, we do the sing-song, and in the middle of my sentence I go up, and at the end I go back down, and then I do that in the next line. You hear this at weddings. People doing a speech for the first time since high school, they have that cadence, and the way that I fought against that when I first started performing was just to really feel my voice in my chest. I don't have to put a lilt on the end unless it's intentional, because I'm not going to apologize while I'm talking to the people who are listening. You just got to have confidence in what you're saying, and pause. Sometimes I get a bit cocky. I'll pause for too long because I'm just holding everyone there in silence and I'm like, oh, the power. But if you have them, you have them. I will hold chubby, soft limbs against my chest, against breasts that will never feed and a belly that will never swell, and I will break my own heart over and over again. But I will give every part of the mother I might have been to the babies my brother and sisters might create. This is where I lead the audience to the light switch in this poem, to quote Bill Moran again. It was a genuine fear of mine that I wouldn't be able to look at a baby related to me without feeling grief for a really long time. I also feared that if I ever wanted to get pregnant, I wouldn't be able to. I would be punished for having an abortion by never being able to get pregnant again if I wanted to. What was that about? That was intense. I was very pleased to learn when my sister had a baby that I can put that love somewhere. Fleabag said that in season 1. I don't know where to put all the love I had for her mum. And you can just give it to someone else. I do have love for a hypothetical baby that I might have had and a mother I might have been, but I'm so happy to give all of that potential and all of that nurturing and love to babies who are alive and are connected to me and will grow up knowing me. And we can be a village. I will be Auntie Dolly, Tanta Adara, whichever is easiest for tiny mouths to find their ways around, and I will let go of what might have been. I will let go. I will finally let go. There is a bit of a double meaning in using future tense in a poem because we play with tense all the time. Parts of that poem, I am talking about something that happened in the past and I use present tense because I'm experiencing it again. Making a big emotional decision is usually not something that happens once forever. Every time I perform the poem, I'm letting go of a little bit more of any tension I hold. So it is a statement and also a promise that I will let go. And I definitely, when I wrote it, I needed to say it multiple times. I needed to repeat it to believe it. But it was a genuine release. It was a really bolstering experience to be able to share that with the audience at Bankstown Poetry Slam. I love them so much for holding space for that and to Bilal for creating that community. He is everyone's poetry uncle, and we're so lucky to have him. I would not have felt safe in a space like that unless everyone had worked together to create it. You know, I've been hugged by women of all ages when getting off stage after performing that poem, and they don't have to say anything. I understand. They've been through something similar, and I've been hugged by, 70-year-olds. Things stay with you. Things that happen in your body stay with you forever, but they don't need to haunt you if you turn it into something else. I will be Auntie Dolly, Tanta Adara, whichever is easiest for tiny mouths to find their ways around, and I will let go of what might have been. I will let go. I will finally let go.